Although the golden age of piracy, which spanned from the 1650s to the 1730s, was over, the seas were far from safe. 19th century American politics were plagued with conflict between two opposing parties, thus little attention was given to the dangers of the sea and those who controlled it. It is when Captain Barnabas Lincoln set sail to Cuba from the port of Hingham, Massachusetts, that the extent of these dangers becomes evident. Born in 1839, Barnabas was a merchant from the town of Hingham, Massachusetts, where he resided with his wife Rachel and their 6 children. In her diaries, his daughter Emily reflected on his role as a father and merchant. She recalled, Barnabas Lincoln Jr. was part owner with his father of the Jeannette, which they sailed in trade between Hingham, Boston, and Philadelphia. Due to his travels, Barnabas had extensive experience interacting with a variety of undisciplined and unruly crowds. In the same journal, Emily described the rough characters Barnabas and his son often encountered. In one particular bar fight, she explains how, one after another of the other captains slumped to the floor, leaving the 2 Lincolns alert and ready to return to their vessel.
In his self-documented journey, Captain Barnabas Lincoln embarked on a voyage from Hingham, Massachusetts to the Caribbean in order to deliver a variety of goods including flour, beef, potatoes, etc. The voyage down to the Caribbean was smooth sailing until he and his crew encountered Cuban pirates and were marooned on a desert island with few provisions. The pirates seized control of Barnabas' ship, cargo, and crew, even confiscating sentimental items with little monetary value, including Barnabas' personal family prayer book. Although the pirates were indecisive in taking a course of action regarding the captured crew, they eventually decided to maroon them on a remote desert island in the Caribbean. In his narrative, Barnabas explains, "We were carried together with 4 Spanish prisoners to a small low island or key of sand in the shape of a half moon and partly covered with mangrove trees." During the time in which the buccaneers were formulating their plan of abandonment, Barnabas had skeptically befriended Nicola the pirate. Once marooned, Nicola returned the family prayer book to Barnabas, which helped guide him emotionally and spiritually during the grueling days to come. Having expended their provisions and found limited supplies, scouring and exploring the island, Barnabas and the others had resigned to death. It is then that Nicola returned, having abandoned the pirates, to rescue the men. In his journal, Barnabas recalls, "Do you now believe Nicola is your friend?" "Yes," said he. "No words can express my emotions at this moment. This was a friend indeed." Once Nicola's ship had brought the men to safety, Barnabas invited Nicola to accompany him to the United States. Years later, Nicola finds the Lincoln family and lives out the rest of his life as an artist and sailing instructor in the town of Hingham. Throughout Captain Barnabas Lincoln's experience as a victim of piracy in the Caribbean during the 19th century, he explored uncharted islands, encountered rude and violent pirates, and exchanged life stories and sentimental items with Nicola, making his story both unique while also providing insight to the complexities of the institution of piracy during that time period. The institution of piracy throughout and leading up to the 19th century proved to be a highly convoluted and disjointed system in which men banded together for a plethora of different reasons with the intent of capturing merchant ships. Despite the fact that Barnabas' story takes place after the golden age of piracy, there still existed a fine line between government-sanctioned privateers and illegal buccaneers. In privateering, the offenders were allowed to keep the merchandise plundered from enemy ships. Consequently, the trade of political rivals was weakened. This practice of privateering existed for centuries. In the 1670s, Jamaica's governor, Sir Thomas Modifer, wrote, "You are to take notice and advise your fleet and soldiers that you are on the old, pleasing account of no purchase, no pay, and therefore all that which is got shall be divided amongst them according to the accustomed rules." It was later called revolving on the account. This idea of privateering led to the formation of many other independent and illegal pirate ships, as the merchandise acquired was often extremely lucrative. Ironically, raiders' success contributed to their demise, as smaller Spanish-American outposts were abandoned, diminishing the number of easy targets, while garrisons became concentrated and more heavily fortified. Because of the complex nature of sanctioned and illegal piracy, some were tricked into believing that they were legal pirateers, and subsequently trapped as part of a pirate crew. Nicola was among these involuntary pirates, thinking originally that he would be working for the Spanish crown, and as such felt morally obligated to aid in Barnabas and his crew's survival. Similarly, Barnabas explains how the pirate ship he was plundered by bore the Spanish flag,
but did not work for the Spanish crown.
You have both sides of it, whereas, Barnabas, gets captured by this pirate crew who are evil men. They're men who, murder people and maroon them on desert islands and things like that. Whereas, Nicola, who's this nice, honorable guy, originally from Scotland, who came here to make his fortune as a privateer and wanted to do it legally and appropriately. Not that, you're still essentially raiding ships, which is why I say it's a fine line.
Captain Barnabas Lincoln's experience on the high seas was unlike anything the small town of Hingham, Massachusetts had ever seen. His story of survival when the odds were stacked against him widely influenced the ideologies and tenets of his small merchant-based town. Hingham was founded by middle to upper middle class workers and was, from its foundation, conservative with East Anglican ideals. Like many other coastal towns, it possessed an active port, and it was common to witness traders traveling up and down the East Coast. Despite the almost constant maritime traffic, it was relatively uncommon to be marooned, and especially rare to survive given the extremely violent nature of buccaneers.
They would hang people up in the rigging and use them for target practice with knives and muskets. The nastiest one of all was the entrail one, where they slit you open, grabbed hold of your entrails, tied it onto a stick, and then made you dance until all your entrails came out, I presume.
Barnabas' story is also unique, as it is rare to find such a well-documented explanation and portrayal of being held captive by pirates in the 1800s. That being said, it was not unheard of. In 1722, a different Massachusetts resident, Philip Ashton, was marooned near Nova Scotia, and after refusing to join the pirate ranks, was enslaved on the ship. He later escaped in March of 1723 on a small island off the coast of Honduras. He survived there until his rescue in June of the following year by a British ship. He, like Barnabas, later wrote a book explaining his captivity and subsequent escape. The reason founding the publication of both stories was to increase awareness surrounding the dangers of commerce. Barnabas sought to promote the implementation of heightened security and monitoring of the seas for the protection of international trade. A final aspect that makes his story so unique is the bond formed between Nicola and Barnabas. It is almost unheard of for a captive and his captors to form a bond in such dire circumstances. Years later, Nicola gives a dagger to Barnabas, marking their continued friendship even after their escape.
Some may argue that this small-town hero, while he has indisputably experienced a life-changing adventure that includes aspects of exploration, exchange, and encounter, has had no greater importance or impact on history. While he certainly lacks in fame, it is small stories and local histories that have developed the American culture and shaped public attitudes toward the passing of legislature and perception of the world. In Hingham at the time of his journey, the entire town was impacted by his voyage both politically and economically. It was common practice that when a ship went off trading, as Barnabas's had, several locals invested in the venture, stimulating the local economy. The publication of his story would have impacted the public's readiness to invest and prompted a shift in local opinion regarding the regulation and monitoring of the seas at the time. In the prequel to his book, Barnabas explains that his purpose in publishing his experience is to urge our governments to still more vigorous measures for the protection of our commerce. In 1820, only 8 years after the publication of his narrative, the Act of 1820 was passed, titled, "An Act to Continue in Force, an Act to protect the commerce of the United States and to punish the crime of piracy, and also to make further provisions for punishing the crime of piracy." His narrative was one of many small local cases that altered public attitude, allowing for people to see a need for change in policy and opening their minds to said change.
The complex nature of the institution of piracy was transformed into a trade of manipulation and uncertainty, where misguided people could be tricked into participating and harmless traders continued to be captured and killed. Furthermore, the story of Barnabas clearly incorporates the ideas of exploration, encounter, and exchange while simultaneously depicting the inner workings of piracy. His experience is unique to Hingham, Massachusetts, and it helped shape local opinions regarding future changes in commerce policy. Small-town stories are at the root of our nation's history, and while they are often overshadowed by greater feats of humanity, they play an influential role in shaping the nation.
We would like to take this time to acknowledge the Hingham Historical Society for their continued assistance and valuable resources that made this documentary possible. For all other citations, please see attached bibliography.